Hello and welcome to the Ryan Rivers channel. I hope you enjoy today's story. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you gave them everything you had? Your home, your savings, your future, and only later discovered it was all a lie? This is the story of a quiet man who believed he had found love late in life, but instead, he walked straight into the greatest betrayal of his life. And when the truth finally came out, it destroyed a family. Let me tell you about Victor. Victor was 64 years old. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but he was the kind of man people trusted. The kind of man who worked the same job for almost 40 years, never complained, never caused trouble, and always kept his promises. For decades, Victor lived in a small two-room apartment on the third floor of an old building. The apartment wasn't fancy. The wallpaper was fading. The kitchen cabinets were older than most of the neighbors. But it was his. Every corner of that apartment carried memories. His son's first steps. His wife cooking soup on cold winter nights. The sound of laughter that once filled those walls. But life changes people. Years earlier, Victor's wife passed away after a long illness, and after that, the apartment became very quiet. Too quiet. At first, Victor told himself he liked the silence, but the truth was different. Loneliness is a strange thing. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It slowly fills the empty spaces of your life until one day you realize you're eating dinner alone every night. You're watching TV with no one to talk to. And sometimes, the only voice you hear all day is your own. Victor had one son. His name was Daniel. Daniel was married and lived in another city. He loved his father, but life kept him busy. Work, bills, family responsibilities. They talked on the phone every week, sometimes twice, but it wasn't the same as sitting together at the kitchen table, and Victor never wanted to be a burden. So whenever Daniel asked, "Dad, are you okay?" Victor always answered the same way. "Of course, son. Everything's fine." But deep inside, it wasn't fine. One evening, everything changed. It was early autumn. The air was cool, and the park near Victor's apartment was covered in golden leaves. Victor liked walking there. It helped him clear his mind. He would sit on the same wooden bench near the lake and watch the ducks swim slowly across the water. On that particular evening, someone else was sitting on his bench. A woman. She looked around Victor's age. She had short brown hair and a calm, confident posture. When Victor approached, he hesitated, but the woman noticed him and smiled. "Oh," she said politely. "Were you planning to sit here?" Victor laughed softly. "Well, I usually do." She moved slightly. "Then please, sit." Her name was Elena, and that simple moment on a quiet park bench would change Victor's life forever. They started talking. At first, it was small talk. The weather, the ducks, the beautiful colors of autumn. But slowly the conversation became deeper. Elena was a widow too. Her husband had died 5 years earlier. She lived in a house on the edge of the city. Unlike Victor, she wasn't completely alone. She had a daughter named Natalie. Natalie was married and lived nearby. "She visits me often," Elena said with a warm smile. "You're lucky," Victor replied quietly. Elena looked at him carefully. "And you?" "I have a son," Victor said. "He lives in another city." There was a brief silence between them, the kind of silence that only people who understand loneliness can share. From that day forward, Victor started coming to the park more often, and, strangely enough, Elena was usually there too. Sometimes they walked around the lake, sometimes they fed the ducks, sometimes they just sat and talked for hours. For the first time in years, Victor felt something he thought was gone forever. Excitement, warmth, hope. It felt strange at first, falling in love at 64. But Elena had a way of making Victor feel alive again. She laughed easily. She told stories about her youth. She listened when Victor talked about his late wife. And most importantly, she never made him feel old. One evening, after weeks of meeting in the park, Elena said something unexpected. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "you shouldn't be living alone." Victor smiled. Well, life doesn't always give us a choice. Elena looked directly into his eyes. Sometimes it does. Victor didn't fully understand what she meant. Not yet. But something about the way she said it made his heart beat faster. Over the next few months, their relationship grew stronger. They went to cafes. They watched movies together. They celebrated Victor's birthday. Even Daniel noticed the change during their phone calls. "Dad," Daniel said one evening, surprised, "you sound happy." Victor laughed. "Maybe I am." "Is there someone special?" Daniel asked carefully. Victor hesitated for a moment. Then he said the words that would begin everything. "Yes. Her name is Elena." At first, Daniel was skeptical. He didn't know this woman. He had never met her. But Victor sounded happier than he had in years. And Daniel didn't want to take that away from him. So he simply said, "If she makes you happy, that's what matters." 6 months later, Victor made a decision that shocked everyone. One evening, sitting in the park where they first met, he took Elena's hand and said quietly, "Will you marry me?" Elena didn't hesitate. She smiled and said, "Yes." For Victor, it felt like a second chance at life, a new beginning, a new family. But what Victor didn't know was that this decision would soon cost him everything he had. And the worst part, the betrayal, had already begun. When Victor told his son he was getting married again, Daniel went silent. Not because he was angry, but because he was surprised. "Married?" Daniel asked slowly over the phone. "Yes," Victor said, trying to sound confident. There was a short pause. "Dad, you've known her how long?" "About 6 months." Another pause, not a comfortable one. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully before speaking. 6 months isn't very long. Victor sighed. "I know how it sounds. But I'm not young anymore, Daniel. When you reach my age, you stop wasting time." Daniel didn't respond right away. He loved his father, and he knew how lonely Victor had been since his mother died. But something about the situation felt fast, too fast. Still, Daniel didn't want to hurt him. "If she makes you happy," Daniel finally said, "then I support you." Victor smiled. That was exactly what he wanted to hear. But Daniel had no idea that one day he would wish he had asked many more questions. The wedding was small, very small. No big hall, no expensive decorations, just a quiet ceremony at the city registry office. A few flowers, a few friends, and 2 families meeting for the first time. That was the day Victor finally met Natalie, Elena's daughter. Natalie was in her early 30s, beautiful, stylish, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately drew attention. Her husband, Mark, stood beside her, tall, calm, quiet. Daniel noticed something strange about them immediately. They looked comfortable. Not in the way people usually look when they meet new family members, but comfortable in a different way.
almost like they already knew exactly how everything would go. Daniel shook Natalie's hand. "Nice to meet you," he said. "You too," she replied politely. Her smile was perfect, almost too perfect. The ceremony lasted less than 20 minutes. Victor and Elena signed the papers. The official congratulated them. Everyone clapped. Just like that, they were husband and wife. Victor looked happier than Daniel had seen him in years. He kept holding Elena's hand, like he was afraid she might disappear. And Elena? She smiled the entire time. Warm, charming, convincing. If anyone had doubts about her, they didn't show it. After the ceremony, the small group went to a restaurant nearby. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place with wooden tables and soft music. Victor stood up to make a toast. He lifted his glass slowly. "I didn't think life would give me another chance like this," he said. His voice trembled slightly. "But sometimes, when you least expect it, happiness finds you again." He looked at Elena. "I thought my life was already behind me. But Elena showed me something important." He paused. "That it's never too late to start again." Everyone raised their glasses. "To new beginnings." Glasses clinked. Smiles filled the room. It looked like the start of a beautiful new chapter. But Daniel noticed something strange. Across the table, Natalie and her husband exchanged a quick glance. A glance that lasted only a second, but it was enough to leave a small, uncomfortable feeling in Daniel's stomach. He didn't know why. He couldn't explain it. So he ignored it. 2 weeks after the wedding, Victor officially moved into Elena's house. It was larger than his apartment, a quiet 2-story home near the edge of the city. There was a small garden, a wooden fence, and tall trees surrounding the yard. "See?" Elena said warmly as they walked inside. "Much better than that old apartment of yours." Victor laughed. "Well, it does have more space." But as they carried the last boxes inside, Elena said something that would later change everything. "Victor," she said casually, "what are you planning to do with your apartment?" Victor shrugged. "I suppose I'll keep it." "Just in case." Elena stopped walking. "Just in case what?" Victor looked confused. "Well, it's still my home." Elena crossed her arms gently. "But Victor, you live with me now." "Yes." "So why keep an empty apartment?" He hadn't thought about it that way. Elena continued softly. "You're paying utilities, taxes, maintenance, for a place you don't even use." Victor nodded slowly. "That's true." Elena smiled. "You should sell it." At first, Victor wasn't sure. That apartment had been his home for decades. It held memories, history,
A part of his life. But Elena kept talking, not aggressively, not forcefully, just logically. "Think about it," she said one evening over dinner. "You could sell the apartment, put the money in the bank, and live comfortably for the rest of your life." She poured him tea and added gently, "We could even travel. Maybe go to the sea together." Victor imagined it, walking along the beach with Elena, sunset over the water, a peaceful retirement. It sounded perfect. Too perfect. A few days later, Elena brought up the subject again. "Have you thought about the apartment?" "Yes," Victor admitted. "And?" "I'm still thinking." Elena nodded slowly. Then she said something very persuasive. "Victor, we're a family now. What's yours is mine. And what's mine is yours." She took his hand. "We should build our future together."
Those words meant a lot to Victor. He had always believed marriage meant trust, complete trust. So finally, after several weeks of thinking, Victor made the decision. He would sell the apartment. Daniel found out during a phone call. "Dad, you're selling your apartment?" "Yes." "Why?" "Well, I live with Elena now." Daniel felt uneasy again. "That apartment is your security." "I know." "But Elena had a good idea." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "What idea?" "We'll put the money in a bank account. It will earn interest. And it will secure our future." Daniel slowly exhaled. "I guess that makes sense." But something still didn't feel right. Still, he trusted his father. And Victor trusted Elena completely. What none of them knew was that Elena already had a very different plan for that money. A plan Victor would never suspect. A plan that involved her daughter. And a secret that would soon destroy everything. Because while Victor believed the money would go safely into the bank, Elena had already decided something else. The money would never reach the bank. Not a single dollar. And when the truth finally came out, it would start a war inside the family. A war that would end in a courtroom.
When Victor finally decided to sell his apartment, he told himself it was the beginning of a better life, a fresh start, a new marriage, a future that didn't feel lonely anymore. But sometimes the decisions that feel the most hopeful become the ones we regret the most. The apartment sold faster than Victor expected. The real estate agent called just 2 weeks after listing it. "Mr. Victor, we already have a buyer," she said excitedly. "A young couple. They love the place." Victor looked around the apartment as he held the phone. The same faded wallpaper. The same kitchen table where his son had done homework. The same window where his late wife used to grow flowers. It suddenly felt strange, like saying goodbye to a part of his life. "Are you still there?" the agent asked. "Yes," Victor replied quietly. "They're offering a good price, actually a little above market value." Victor nodded slowly. "All right. I'll sell it." The next few weeks passed quickly. Documents were signed, papers were stamped, lawyers finalized the sale, and one morning, Victor stood inside the empty apartment one last time. The rooms echoed when he walked. No furniture, no pictures, no memories left on the walls, just silence. He stood in the middle of the living room and whispered softly, "Goodbye." Then he closed the door for the last time. The money arrived 3 days later, a large transfer from the buyer. Years of hard work, now sitting in Victor's account. For a moment, he felt proud. This was everything he had built during his lifetime, his safety, his future, his independence. And according to the plan he and Elena had discussed, the next step was simple. Put the money into a high-interest savings account, secure their retirement. Easy, safe, responsible. At least, that's what Victor believed. That evening, Victor told Elena the good news. "The money arrived today," he said while they ate dinner. Elena's eyes lit up immediately. "Already?" "Yes." "That was fast." She smiled warmly. "That's wonderful, Victor." "So tomorrow we can go to the bank together," he said. But Elena paused for a moment. Just a brief pause. Then she spoke carefully. "You know, there's actually something easier we could do." Victor looked up. "What do you mean?" Elena leaned back in her chair. "My cousin works at a private bank. They offer much better interest rates than regular banks." Victor raised his eyebrows.
Really? Yes, she said confidently. But the account needs to be opened through her. And the process takes a few days. That's not a problem, Victor replied. Elena nodded.
So here's what we'll do. You transfer the money to me for now. I'll arrange everything with my cousin. And then the funds will be placed in the investment account, she smiled reassuringly. Simple. For a brief moment, Victor hesitated, not because he didn't trust her, but because it was a lot of money, his entire life savings. Still, this was his wife, his partner, his family now. And Elena noticed his hesitation, so she gently placed her hand over his. Victor, we're married. You trust me, right? He smiled softly. Of course I do. That was the moment everything changed. The next morning, Victor went to the bank. The clerk helped him process the transfer. It was a large amount, the kind of transfer that requires confirmation. Are you sure you want to send this to this account? The clerk asked. Yes, Victor replied calmly. It's for my wife. The clerk nodded. All right. He typed the numbers carefully, and then, with a single click, the money was gone, transferred to Elena's account. Victor walked out of the bank feeling relieved. His future felt secure. He trusted Elena completely. He had no reason not to. That evening, Elena hugged him warmly. Everything will be taken care of, she promised. Just give me a few days. Victor smiled. Take your time. But something interesting happened that same night. Elena made a phone call, not to her cousin, not to any bank. She called someone else, her daughter, Natalie. Natalie answered immediately. Mom? Elena lowered her voice. It's done. On the other end of the phone, Natalie sounded excited. Already? Yes. He transferred everything today. There was a short silence. Then Natalie asked the question she had been waiting to ask. How much? Elena told her the number. Natalie gasped. That's more than we expected. Elena smiled slightly. Well, he trusted me. Natalie laughed quietly. Of course he did. After all, Victor had no idea. But Natalie and her husband had been struggling financially for months. They wanted to buy a new car, a nice one, and they had been dreaming about a vacation by the sea. But dreams require money. Money they didn't have. Until now. Tomorrow, Elena continued quietly, I'll transfer the money to you. Natalie sounded almost shocked. All of it? For now. You and Mark can handle your problems. And later we'll figure out what to tell Victor. Natalie laughed again. You're amazing, Mom. Elena's voice became serious. Just remember, he must never find out. Relax, Natalie said confidently. He's old. He trusts you. He'll never suspect anything. But someone else, far away in another city, was about to start asking questions. Questions that would slowly uncover the truth. Questions that would lead to anger, betrayal, and eventually, a courtroom battle that would tear this new family apart. Because Victor's son, Daniel, was about to notice something very strange, something that didn't make sense. And once Daniel started digging, the truth would be impossible to hide. And when Victor finally realized what had happened to his money, it would break his heart in a way he never imagined. Weeks later, Daniel called his father. Dad, what happened with the apartment money? It's being invested, Victor said, in the bank account. Daniel frowned. What bank? Elena's cousin is handling it. Daniel checked the bank name online later. It didn't exist.
That was when the alarm bells started ringing. He contacted a friend who worked in banking. Within hours, they found the truth. The money had been transferred to Natalie, then spent. Car dealership, travel agency, luxury resort. Daniel drove 4 hours to confront his father. "Dad, you need to see this." Victor stared at the phone, at the bank transfers. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." But the evidence was undeniable. When Elena returned home that evening, Victor asked one simple question. "Where is the money?" The argument that followed shook the entire house. She admitted giving the money to Natalie. "They needed help," she said. "You should have asked me," Victor shouted. "You would have said no," she replied. That was the moment Victor realized something terrible. She had never planned to invest the money at all. The next day, Victor met a lawyer. The case moved quickly. Fraud, financial deception, legal documents were filed. Elena received a lawsuit demanding the money back. She laughed at first, but weeks later, everyone found themselves sitting inside a courtroom. The judge examined the evidence, bank transfers, receipts, witness testimony. Elena's lawyer claimed the money was a gift, but Victor's lawyer presented text messages where Elena promised the money would be placed in an investment account. Then came the final blow, an audio recording, Elena's voice. "Tomorrow I'll transfer the money to you, and later we'll figure out what to tell Victor." The courtroom fell silent. Her story collapsed instantly. After reviewing everything, the judge spoke. Mrs. Petrova deliberately misled her husband regarding the use of his funds. He ordered her to return the full amount. If the money could not be returned voluntarily, the court would seize assets. Natalie and Mark were forced to sell the new SUV. Their vacation was canceled. Savings accounts were emptied. Piece by piece, the money returned to Victor. And shortly after, Victor filed for divorce. Months later, Victor sat with Daniel on the same park bench where he had first met Elena. Autumn leaves covered the ground again. "Do you regret meeting her?" Daniel asked. Victor thought for a moment. "No." "Why not?" "Because I learned something important." "What?" "Loneliness can make people trust too quickly." He paused. "But I also learned something else." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Family is the greatest protection we have." Daniel smiled quietly. If he hadn't asked questions, if he hadn't investigated, his father might have lost everything. Before leaving the park, Victor said something Daniel would never forget. "Trust is one of the most valuable things in the world. It takes years to build, but only one lie to destroy." Sometimes, the people who protect you the most aren't the ones who promise happiness. They're the ones who ask the hard questions, the ones who refuse to let you be deceived, because real family doesn't stay silent when something is wrong. Real family fights for you, and sooner or later, the truth always finds its way into the light, no matter how carefully someone tries to hide it.
The end. Let me know what you think about this story in the comments.